To drink or make yourself comfortable. So, welcome to this talk, Art Imitates Life, Imitates Art. Edvard Munch, Henrik Ibsen, and Hedda Gabler. What a trio. This is offered in conjunction with the upcoming production of Northern New England Repertory Theatre Company staging of Hedda Gabler at Colby Sawyer College in New London, opening on May 30th and running through June 8th. I am Bente Torjussen, and I'm the Executive Director of AVA Gallery, and it is such a pleasure for me to be here and have the opportunity to give a talk that is not going to be academic in any way, and is going to emphasize some intriguing relationships between Edvard Munch and Henrik Ibsen. It is structured as a play in 4 acts with a dramatic prologue, and will probably run about an hour. That's my talk. Other things. Afterwards, I hope you will stay around for questions, refreshments, and good conversations. And we are very pleased to offer this program for free. But I would like to remind you that organizations like Northern New England Repertory Theatre Company and AVA would not exist, nor could we offer free programs like these without the generous support of community members. So please keep an eye out for the donation jobs. Before I get going, I would like to express my warmest thanks to a number of individuals. To Patricia Denny and Joanne Tulonen of the Northern New England Repertory Theatre Company. With the production of Hedda Gabler in mind, they contacted me and suggested a talk that might touch upon the fact that Ibsen also painted and that Munch had literary ambitions. Honestly, I didn't think that Ibsen's somewhat meticulous and delicately rendered landscape scenes convey any of the drama and strength of his plays. And while I myself am particularly interested in Munch's own writings, there were other aspects of the interplay between these two creative giants that intrigued me more. And I hope that this will be conveyed in my talk. Special thanks go to Peggy Hammer of Grantham, New Hampshire, for lending us this larger-than-life bust of Ibsen, created by her father-in-law, the Norwegian-American sculptor Trygve Hammer, who died in 1947. The bust was probably made in the late 1920s. Many thanks also to Justin O'Rourke, who transported Ibsen safely from Grantham to Ava. I wish to thank Professor Conrad Kenkel for insightful conversations and most helpful material provided to me with regard to the staging of Ibsen's Ghosts and Hedda Gabler in Berlin by the noted theater director Max Reinhardt in 1906 and 1907, and for which Munch made sketches for set design. Big thanks are due to Barbara Jones for invaluable assistance with scanning images and for her experience with editing my PowerPoint presentation, since I'm useless in that regard. Many thanks also to AVA's staff for all their help with preparing and setting up for this event. And a thank you in general to AVA Gallery and Art Center for being a venue where events such as this, as well as tomorrow's presentation, when artist Mary Louise Pearson will talk about the important role of her grandfather, Nelson Rockefeller, the role he played as an art collector. We are very grateful that we can hold such events here. And now a special thank to go to equity actors Lee Ann Hutchison and Grant Neal, who currently star in Shaker Bridge Theatre's North Shore Fish, for their willingness to initiate this program by reading a brief excerpt from Hedda Gabler. I need to point out that they will be reading from a different translation than the one by Nicholas Rudal, which is being used by Northern New England Repertory Theatre Company for their upcoming production. Grant and Leanne are using a translation by Rolf Fjelde, a translation that I myself find particularly compelling. Before they do their reading from the dramatic end of the third act, I will give a brief synopsis of the play, which was written in Ibsen's Danish-Norwegian language of the day and published in 1890. It has been summed up as a social drama of the late 19th century, exploring a caged woman's desire for escape and yearning for individual and spiritual freedom. Here comes the synopsis. Hedda Gabler had just returned from abroad to Christiania, the former name of the capital, now named Oslo. She had returned from a 6-month-long honeymoon with her husband, Jørgen Tessmann, a rather pedantic scholar who spent most of the honeymoon doing research on medieval Brabantian crafts and artifacts. Ibsen gave Hedda her maiden name so as to emphasize that she is more her father's daughter than her husband's wife. Her father was the aristocratic General Gabler. During the first act, there are hints suggesting that Hedda may be pregnant. Thea Elvsted, an old friend of Hedda from their school days, comes visiting, bringing news about their mutual friend Eilert Løvborg. It is implied that Hedda and Løvborg are former lovers. Løvborg, who is known to have had a serious drinking problem, had just finished a manuscript on history that rumors say is inspired and superb, way superior to Tessmann's research. Thea had been instrumental in helping Løvborg stop drinking and also with his research. Hedda is concerned that Løvborg, through his unanticipated scholarly accomplishments, may become a rival for the professorship that Tessmann hopes to be appointed to at the university. A little later, Løvborg comes visiting. Hedda is jealous of the influence Thea has had on him, and she tempts him into having a drink. He then proceeds to go out to a party where Tessmann also is among the guests. Løvborg had carried his manuscript with him, and during the brawl of the night, he manages to misplace it. Tessmann finds the manuscript, brings it home and hides it, but Hedda knows where it is. At the end of Act 3, which is what Leanne and Grant will be reading from, Løvborg appears at the home of the Tessmanns again and confesses to Hedda that he is an utter failure in life, and that he, during the events of the last night, lost his child, that is his manuscript. Hedda talks him into ending his life, but do it beautifully, she says. And then she gives him one of her pistols. He leaves to commit the act. Hedda then retrieves Løvborg's manuscript and throws it into the fire. Symbolically, she burns the child of Thea and Løvborg. In parentheses, it's worth noting that Munch referred to his paintings as his children. In Act 4, it becomes known that Løvborg had died from a gunshot wound. Did he shoot himself? Did the shot get fired accidentally? Did somebody else shoot him? These questions will actually be raised later in this talk, after a dramatic shooting incident that Munch experienced. It becomes clear that, however Løvborg died, it was not a beautiful death. Thea enters and then says that she has numerous notes from the research she previously did with Løvborg, and that she might be able, with Tessmann's help, to reconstruct Løvborg's manuscript. Together, Thea and Løvborg immediately set out to initiate this work. Hedda takes her pistols. She frequently plays with them during the performance. and goes into an adjacent room. She plays some loud music on the piano, then a shot is heard. Hedda has taken her own life. Grant and Leanne. I will read the stage directions. Mrs. Elvsted, Löfborg's assistant and muse, exits from Hedda's drawing room, leaving Hedda and Löfborg alone.
You're not going to take her home then, Mr. Lothar?
Aye. Through the streets. So that people could see she'd been with me.
I don't know what else may have happened last night. But is it so completely irredeemable?
It won't just end with last night. I know that well enough. But the thing is, I've lost all desire for that kind of life. I don't want to start it again, not now. It's the courage and daring for life. That's what she's broken in.
To think that that pretty little fool could have a man's fate in her hands. But still, how could you treat her so heartlessly?
Don't say it was heartless.
To go ahead and destroy what's filled her whole being for months and years, that's not heartless.
To you, Hedda, I can't tell the truth.
The truth.
Promise me first. Give me your word that what I tell you now, you'll never let Thea know.
You have my word.
Good. I can tell you then that what I said here just now isn't true.
About the manuscript?
Yes, I didn't tear it up. Or throw it in the fjord.
No, but where is it then?
I destroyed it all the same, Hedda. Utterly destroyed it.
I don't understand.
Thea said that what I've done for her was like killing a child.
Yes, that's what she said.
But killing his child, that's not the worst thing a father can do.
That's not the worst.
No, I wanted to spare Thea the worst.
And what's that, the worst?
Suppose now that a man in the early morning hours, say, after a wild, drunken night, comes home to his child's mother and says, listen, I've been out to this place and that, here and there, and I had our child with me in this place and that, and I lost the child. Just lost it. God only knows what hands it's come into or who's got hold of it.
Well, but when all's said and done, it was only a book.
Thea's pure soul was in that book.
Yes, I understand.
Well then, you understand that now, for her and me, there's no future possible anymore.
What do you intend to do?
Nothing. Just put an end. The sooner, the better.
Either of them, listen to me. Could you arrange that it's done beautifully?
Beautiful. With vine leaves in my hair, as you used to dream in your...
No, I don't believe in vine leaves anymore. But beautifully, all the same. For this once. Goodbye. You must go now. Never come here again.
Goodbye, then. And give my best to George Tessma.
No! Wait. I want you to have a souvenir from me.
Hedda goes to the writing desk and opens a drawer and a pistol case, then comes back to Löfborg with one of the pistols.
That is that the souvenir?
Do you recognize it? It was aimed at you once.
You should have used it then.
Here, use it now.
Thanks.
And beautifully. My Lord Loveboard promised me that.
Goodbye. Alejandro.
After a moment, Hedda goes to the writing table, where she hid Löfberg's manuscript and takes it out. She then goes to the armchair by the stove and sits with the manuscript in her lap. After another moment, she opens the stove door and begins feeding the pages into the fire.
Now I'm burning your child, Taya. You, with your curly hair. Your child. And I would love boys. Now I'm burning. I'm burning the child.
This here, and we're going to have that out of here.
Yeah.
This out of here. And the PowerPoint. So, let's see here. No, I need markers. Right away. Just a little patience. I don't see that very well, do you? Now it's emerging. Okay. So, first of all, thank you for this incredible presentation. I now will begin with a brief presentation of the three protagonists in my talk: Edvard Munch, Henrik Ibsen, and Tulla Larsen. If you haven't heard about the latter before, just wait, you will. Munch's paintings and drawings will be driving this presentation. Some poignant photographs of both Ibsen and Munch, as well as of Munch's femme fatale, will also be shown. So what is it that continually stirs us up and grabs hold of us when it comes to the works of these two giants? While this talk will not plumb the depth of Ibsen's and Munch's works, it will focus more specifically on how their lives intersected for a period of 15 years, from 1891, when Ibsen returned to Norway after 27 years of exile, until Ibsen's death in 1906. Ibsen's work continued to have a profound influence on Munch throughout his entire life until he died in 1944. And a 1906-1907 commission to do sketches for stage design for Ibsen's Ghosts and Hedda Gabler will be discussed in more detail. Born just outside Oslo in 1863 into a distinguished old Norwegian family, Munch was 32 years old when he painted this dramatic, theatrical self-portrait with cigarette, lit from below, emphasizing his pale, strong hand and his distinguished-looking face, in a sort of bluish haze that characterized many of his paintings from the 1890s. He had already made a considerable name for himself, in particular in Germany, where in the previous 3 years, exhibitions of his paintings had caused their success to scandal. His now so universally known scream, its expressive sound waves continue to reverberate today, had already been created in 3 different versions by the time he painted this painting, including the one that was sold as Sotheby's for 120 million, exactly a year ago tomorrow. And his famous series of paintings, the so-called Frieze of Life, was also taking shape. Initially called From the Modern Life of the Soul, this series explored themes of love, fear of life, and death, and he continued to work on it during his entire life. On and off, Munch was living a cosmopolitan life during the first half of his life. Like many Norwegians, and Ibsen not the least, he needed to get away from the provincial feel of his native country, yet he returned again and again to capture the Nordic essence, the light and the dark, that provided such a significant backdrop for much of his art, both from a symbolic and realistic point of view. Now, let's see if it works. Yes. So it also was for his fellow compatriot, Henrik Ibsen, 35 years Munch senior, and who by 1898, when this portrait was painted, had attained international fame. He left Norway for almost 30 years and lived mainly in Germany and Italy, and returned to his native country in 1891. That was the year that Hedda Gabler first was performed to negative reviews in Munich, Germany. Henrik Ibsen was born to a well-known family in 1828 in Skien, a prosperous old city about 3 hours southwest of Oslo. Munch's father, the military doctor Christian Munch, and his illustrious brother, the historian Peter Andreas Munch, were also born in Skien. Later in life, Henrik Ibsen describes the citizens of Skien in the following manner. They suffer from the shyness of the soul. This description certainly did not apply to Ibsen only, but to Munch's father, also a citizen of Skien, and to Edvard Munch as well. Perhaps it was this shyness of the soul that gave them license to express themselves so powerfully in their art. The Ibsen portrait was painted on commission for the German scholar Julius Elias, writer, art collector, translator, and Ibsen connoisseur, and eventually one of the executors of Ibsen's will. Ibsen did not pose for it. Munch often painted from memory and famously stated, "I do not paint what I see, but what I saw." The painting depicts Ibsen sitting by the window in the dining room of Grand Hotel in Oslo, with a glimpse of the main street, Karl Johan. More about Karl Johan and its as an important state will follow. Ibsen was a regular at Grand Hotel Café during the last few years of his life, and more about that as well. Among Munch's enormous autobiographical writings, there are numerous referrals to Ibsen, and I will read a few of them. He says, "I traveled from Berlin home to Norway in the spring of 1893. I brought a greeting to Ibsen from Dr. Elias and other of his friends in Berlin. It was the beginning of the so-called Ibsen cult. I walked to his apartment in Arbien Street with a card in my pocket. I was aware of Ibsen's shyness, so in a sense I was relieved that he was not at home. I delivered my card, and so I have carried out my obligations for the day." The other note refers to an encounter with Ibsen at the Grand Hotel in 1895, where Munch was meeting the French theatre director Lumière Poe just before Ibsen was to be launched in Paris. "There," writes Munch, and that applies to this painting, "there, Ibsen is sitting next to his glass of punch." I find it interesting that it is next to, not with. "He greets us, and we start talking. He is quite red in the face. and probably somewhat intoxicated. He appeared animated. Yes, I'm writing on a new piece. Yes, it will probably be a demon in that as well. Yes, Ibsen said, all humans carry demons within them. The piece that he was working on was his penultimate play, John Gabriel Borkman, a play that was to take on deep meaning for Munch later in his life. But that has to be focused on for another talk. Okay. Portrait of Tulla Larsen. There we have the third protagonist, the infamous Tulla Larsen, with whom Munch had a stormy love affair for 4 years, from 1898 to 1902. Born in Oslo in 1869 into a wealthy family, she had considerable yet unrealized artistic talent. Tulla was to become Munch's femme fatale, and the source of a personal drama that, for Munch in many ways, came to resonate with Ibsen's Hedda Gabler. Tulla also was, I dare say, throughout the vast literature that now exists on Munch, she has been grossly distorted as a destructive force in his life. Munch himself contributed greatly to that. We will see later how obsessively he wove together fact and fiction, as well as scenes from Ibsen's plays, in both words and in images, to dramatize the demise of their love affair. So now we come to Act 2 of the talk, and the various stages that resonated with Munch's life are being set. Munch's propensity for translating scenes from observed reality into unforgettable, expressive spaces with deep symbolic meaning begins to take shape. This is a drawing from Karl Johan's Street in Oslo, an excellent example of a cityscape transformed into a dramatic stage set. The main street of Oslo, Karl Johan, which is sort of like Oslo's Champs-Élysées, if you will, named after the Swedish king who also ruled Norway after 1814, and it will take a bit of a center stage in the next few minutes. The street provided a perfect stage for Henrik Ibsen's daily promenade to the Grand Hotel, and here on Karl Johan, the young monk, shy and yearning, walked up and down, feeling alienated from the crowd. This is a lithograph from 1895. Again, these peculiar faces underneath, again, it's reminiscent of a stage set. So Munch wrote in several ways related to these images. And here is a little quote from Munch's diary relating to the Karl Johan theme. She greeted him with a soft smile and then walked on. Everything became so empty and he felt so alone. People who passed by looked so strange and awkward, and he felt as if they looked at him, stared at him, all these pale faces in the evening light. The painting of the same motif, and he said, I saw all people behind their masks. I saw through them, and there was suffering in them all. Ibsen soon became a fixture in the street scene, and his diminutive, compact figure was a frequent target for caricaturists. Ibsen was meticulous, precise, and rather vain, wearing boots with high heels and a top hat to make himself look taller. His appearance on Karl Johan Street every day at noon was so punctual that it was said people used to set their clocks from when he showed up. Inside, at the Grand Hotel Café, he always ordered the same drink, whiskey and water. After he had taken off his top hat and groomed his bushy hair, because there was a mirror inside the top of the hat to help him keep an eye on his appearance. Just a quick sketch by Munch showing Ibsen here in an animated conversation at Grand Café. And another one of Ibsen, Red in the Face. This was made sometime between 1906 and 1910. So again, it was made after Ibsen had died. The clouds that can be seen both as cigarette smoke and symbols for his amazing imagination and inspiration. Munch has on numerous occasions written about how interested Ibsen was in this particular painting, Women in Three Stages, painted in 1895, and how he asked Munch to tell him about it and to show him around at his 1895 exhibit in Oslo. Munch later stated that he thought the painting of the three women inspired Ibsen's last play, When We Dead Awaken, from 1899. Writes Munch, "Woman in her diversity is a mystery to the man." And then he continues, "It was in the fall of 1895 I had an exhibition. My paintings caused uproar. People called for a boycotting of the gallery, called for the police. One day I meet Ibsen there, and he walks toward me. This interests me very much," he said. And then he said, "Believe me, it will go with you as with me. The more enemies you get, the more friends you will eventually get." And this is something that Munch quoted again and again throughout his life. Munch continued, "I had to walk around with him, with Ibsen, and he needed to look at every painting. Quite a few of the Frieze of Life paintings were included. The melancholy young man at the beach, Madonna, Scream, Anxiety, Jealousy, the three women in a light night." He was particularly interested in Women in Three Stages, and I had to explain it to him, said Munch. "There is a dreaming woman, the lusty woman, and the woman as a nun. There she stands, pale behind the trees." Some years later, Ibsen wrote When We Dead Awaken, about the sculptor's work that was not completed but disappeared abroad. I recognized many scenes from my life Frieze paintings. The three women, Irene, the woman dressed in white, dreaming. Maya, the lusty naked one, the woman of sorrow with a pale face. These three women appear in Ibsen's drama as I do in my paintings, depicted during the light summer night where life and death, day and night, go hand in hand. Here we have a program cover that Munch was commissioned to do for a performance of Peer Gynt in Paris in 1896. Peer Gynt was to remain one of Munch's favorite Ibsen plays, and it was actually among the Ibsen plays that Freud liked the most. Here, Munch begins to explore a theme that became reoccurring, the older resigned woman juxtaposed with the younger dreaming one. And another one, a program for John Gabriel Borkman, 1897, Paris. And this is the first time Munch made a portrait of Henrik Ibsen. It most likely was inspired by a portrait of Ibsen by Felix Volaton. Ibsen and the Lighthouse is a captivating image. Here we see the playwright with one eye staring at you and keenly observing life around him, and the other eye half closed, looking inward, probing into the psyche. In 1900, Ibsen suffered the first of a number of strokes, and he died in a spacious apartment near the Royal Palace in Oslo on May 23rd in 1906. His last words were, "On the contrary." Okay, fast forward, or backward. In the beginning of the century, Munch spent some turbulent years throughout Europe, while at the same time he had some significant artistic successes in Germany in particular. There he found important patrons, including the sister of Friedrich Nietzsche, and many of his patrons commissioned him to do portraits as well as room decorations. One of the commissions that mattered the most in this context came from the well-known Austrian-born theatre director Max Reinhardt. As an homage to Ibsen following his death, Reinhardt asked Munch to make mood sketches for Ibsen's Ghosts for a performance that opened at the Kammerspiele Theatre in Berlin in November 1906. We'll get back to these sketches. Well, few of Ibsen's plays resonated as deeply with Munch's life as Ghosts. He became familiar with the play in his youth. In this painting from 1892, The Death in the Sick Room, we should note the chair in which his beloved dying sister Sophie is sitting. We don't see her. The chair is seen from the back, but we sense the drama. Also in this painting is so clearly demonstrated Munch's acute sense of a dramatic and expressive stage set, with the floors tipping toward us and the figure frozen in place, seen in frontal position, in profile, or from behind. This image, this painting is called The Sun. During his childhood and youth, Munch suffered from poor health. On one occasion, he was near death. Here, in this image, Munch has portrayed himself during a convalescence, sitting in a slumped position in a chair in which his sister sat when she died, surrounded by the family, and with old family portraits on the wall. And he used this particular setting for his interpretation of Oswald in Ghosts. Oswald was a drunken painter from a good family and suffering from an inherited illness. Writes Munch, my home was a home of illness and death, and I never overcame this. It has all been determining for my art. In a sense, the frieze of life deals with inheritance as a curse, in a way like an Oswald mood. Here is one of the sketches he did for Max Reinhardt. Through the sketches that Munch made for Max Reinhardt's production of Ghosts of the Kammerspiele Theatre in 1906, he secured himself a place in the history of modern theatre. Max Reinhardt, a wunderkind of the Berlin stage, wanted to revitalize German theatre in the new century, so he turned to Munch for a particular strategic contribution to his general effort to replace naturalism in the theatre with a new stage symbolism. He was searching for moods, or in German, Stimmung. He wanted Munch to provide what he called mood sketches to help with the direction of the play. Among the many sketches that Munch made was one that emphasized a large leather black armchair. When one of the Reinhardt's designers protested that the drawing wasn't much help for the furnishing of the room, Reinhardt's answer was, "The heavy armchair tells you all you want to know. The dark coloring reflects the whole atmosphere of the drama. And then look at the walls." This is not the best example for that, but look at the walls. They are the color of deceased gums. We must try to get that tone. It will put the actors in the right mood. Here you see the family portraits from on a wall behind us Oswald. Here is a little painting by Munch painted in 1889, again with the family portraits. So always how he weaves his own personal history together with scenes from Ibsen's plays. Ghost again, and the shadows symbolizing the sins of the past generations. And here we have the depiction of the dying Oswald and Mrs. Alving. It clearly harks back to the painting of the son. The simplification of this scene could hardly have resulted in a more dramatic and expressive essence. The sick child, he painted this painting, the memory of his sister Sophie's death when she was 14 and he was 13. The painting was painted for the first time in 1885, and he went back to painting other versions of it throughout his life. And he said again, it was the unfairness of the inherited illnesses that made me revolt as an artist. The inheritance of weak health that weighed heavily on me and became determining for my outlook on life. On my father's side, there was madness, not a light inheritance. But let's go to some lighter motifs right now. Because while Munch was working on ghosts, Reinhardt also commissioned Munch to make a room decoration for the foyer of his new theater, the Kammerspiele Theater. The frieze in 12 panels were painted in the winter of 1907, and they remained on display there until 1912. It was a poor fit, really, for the whole room, and they weren't seen very often. And only 8 of the panels have been preserved and have since 1966 been in the collection of Neue Nationalgalerie in Berlin. In a letter to his aunt Karen, winter 1907, Munch describes his work on it. It's such commotion here right now around the decoration for a theater in Berlin, Kammerspiele House, so I haven't found the peace and quiet to write sooner. Anyway, the commission is almost completed. The only regret I have is that the compensation does not match the effort. The frieze was painted for all the 4 walls of the foyer, and the motifs are inspired by beach scenes from nearby my house in Åsgårdstrand, he writes. They are ladies and gentlemen in a light summer night. Here, as in so many other of his paintings, it's a seashore that Munch uses as a backdrop against which various scenes are acted out. So this is from the Reinhardt, so-called Reinhardt frieze. Let me go back. This is an earlier painting from the Life frieze. This was painted in the mid-90s. The Reinhardt frieze paintings had a drier appearance. They were painted in casein on canvas and much thinner and lighter in feel. So on the heels of Ghost came Reinhardt's commission for Munch to make sketches for stage sets for Hedda Gabler. Here is Ibsen's meticulous handwriting for the cover for Hedda Gabler. Play in 4 acts by Henrik Ibsen, 1890. Munch, I have to say, having studied him considerably, there are still many difficult interpretations to make from his writing, and you can understand that when you see his handwriting. But you can see on top it says Ibsen and a Life frieze. But his handwriting is far from easy. Here is one of the sketches that he did for Hedda Gabler in the winter of 1907. The play, by the way, opened in March, and it was not a success like Ghosts. But for this work, Munch asked friends in Norway to send photos of modern Norwegian living rooms that were inspired by characteristic contemporary wood furniture, reflecting the rich national heritage of applied art. One wonders if he might have received the idea for this by the reference in Hedda Gabler of Tesman's research of the craft of medieval times in Brabant. This scene is from the earlier part of the play when Thea comes and meets with Hedda Gabler. Another drawing for the set, and it seems to me that here he is using the same big chair that he used in Oswald. There certainly is enough drama in this too. And here we have an interesting one, because it has writing. It both has Munch's own writing and the comments of the director. Munch wrote in German. Sometimes his German was quite peculiar, but one always manages to understand what it was that he wanted to express. He actually was quite fluent in German, fairly good in French, and terrible with the English language. And here, this has been some discussion for a while whether this was part of the Hedda sketches or not. It may have been painted later, but it seems like this fits right in with the other Hedda themes. She's ready to go from one room to the next. I'm going back a little bit. In 1884, 6 years before Ibsen wrote Hedda Gabler, he wrote to a young man, "I do not believe any of us can do anything other or anything better than realizing ourselves in truth and spirit." Pretty amazing statement in 1884. It has been suggested that the tragedy of Hedda was that she was trapped in conventions, which made it impossible for her to become her authentic self, and that she therefore was unable to make a place for herself in a world as wild and as large as her dreams may have been. Okay, here is Hedda in black, and the drama thickens. This particular motif harkens back to Munch's experience with Tulla Larsen. More clearly than in any other of the Hedda images, in this one, Hedda becomes a messenger of death, frozen in her rigid frontal position, just like the frontal figure in the Death in the Sick Room, which we previously looked at. In order to better understand how the drama that had taken place between Tulla Larsen and Edvard Munch a few years earlier, how that came to resonate with the work of Hedda Gabler, we need to go back in time a bit to the circumstances around the shooting, another shooting, that occurred in 1902, resulting in wounds that were to have more of an emotional impact on Munch than the actual physical injury it caused. So here we are at Act 3, the shooting. This is a photo of Tulla Larsen, Munch's mistress, taken in 1898. And I introduced her at the very beginning of this talk. Her actual name was Mathilde. A disclaimer, my daughter Mathilde was not named for her. And she was the youngest daughter of a wealthy wine merchant. She was pushing 30 by the time she met Munch, an age when most women of that generation were married. She was tall and stately, with reddish-yellow hair, and was a prominent figure in the social scene in Oslo. She was a talented piano player and dabbler in art, and was pining for an appropriate husband and soulmate from an acceptable family, and Munch fit the bill. Before they became romantically involved, Tulla modeled for Munch, and this full-figure portrait of her from 1898 was to be included in numerous exhibitions to favorable reviews and was to be close to Munch all of his life. The Dance of Life from 1899, this actually is a later version painted maybe in the 1920s, but the theme, the motif is from that time. Again, we see the beach scene with its undulating shoreline, providing a rhythm and tension. And how it builds upon the theme of women in 3 stages. He finished the painting, the first version, in 1900, at a time when the relationship with Tulla Larsen already had begun to fall apart. According to Munch's descriptions, he is here seen dancing with a woman in red who was his first love. Tulla, however, is both the woman in white and the one in black. And Munch writes, the smiling blonde woman wanted to pick the flower of love, but it couldn't be taken. On the other side, she is dressed in black, thrown out, just as I was thrown away from her dance. And now comes the most iconic photograph of Tulla and Edvard. Taken in Germany in 1900, this has become one of the most frequently reproduced photos of the two of them. A stylish, sophisticated-looking young couple, though she looks a tad more together and elegant and composed than he does. She was animate about the two of them getting married, and he got cold feet. He was afraid that marriage would interfere with his work, and he insisted that his health, both physical and mental, did not make him fit for family life. They tried to live apart. His drinking bouts increased, and he didn't want to see her. In despair, she took an overdose of morphine, but friends came to her side before it was too late. The two of them then met in Munch's small cabin in the resort town of Åsgårdstrand outside Oslo in September of 1902. Munch had been drinking heavily. A revolver was usually around. In Norway, in the years up to 1905, it was particularly common to have weapons around, as it looked like Norway might go to war with Sweden to obtain independence. Luckily, the conflict was peacefully resolved in 1905, when Norway became independent from Sweden. Well, back to Munch and Tulla, what subsequently happened has been reported in many versions. The most frequently told is that Tulla threatened to shoot herself, and that Munch gallantly put his hand on the revolver to prevent it, and that the shot went off and wounded his left hand. Later research has shown that Munch must have had a blackout, and that as he sat around fiddling with the revolver, it accidentally went off, and he suffered a self-inflicted wound. But for years, Tulla took the blame. Here's an X-ray of his hand. It's a wounded hand. The next day, September 12, 1902, Munch was hospitalized. He refused anesthesia because he wanted to see what was going on. And the memory of that we'll see in some later paintings, because he always collected material, both for his painting and his writing. The bullet had passed by his left ring finger and embedded itself in the middle finger. The surgery required removal of the upper joint of the finger, and the injury, thanks to Munch's vivid imagination, then took on dimensions larger than life. This lithograph from 1923 is called The Sin, and it has traditionally, for years and years, been interpreted as being a portrait of Tulla Larsen and Munch taking revenge on her. However, again, later research has shown that Tulla was not the model, and that he actually used a professional model in Berlin who also posed for a number of his other paintings. He continues then up until 1908 with a very dramatic existence. He tries to pull himself together. He's very good at posing. Here he's posing, standing there in the snow. It's like he's acting. And you know, he managed to clean up nicely, despite his Löfborg-like lifestyle. He always managed to look the act. But despite the many successes on the continent, he started acting more and more erratic. Well, here is around 1903 and 4-5, he drew a frantic amount of caricatures, but this one actually is aimed at itself. It is called 1903, Light Night in Christiania. When Munch was arrested for causing trouble in the street by setting up his easel, and Karl Johan is once more the stage. Here we see the crowd shouting at him, and the writing, and he writes in Norwegian as well as German. He describes how the hordes attack him as he, in a light summer night, was painting in the center of Oslo. He probably was arrested, though, not because of his painting, but because of the way he behaved. His notes indicated that he had threatened the hordes with a revolver. At this time, he also made a number of vicious caricatures of his former friends, and in particular of Tulla. Here we see him again posing. Now we can see how he, with bandages on his injured hand and with an etching plate. Again we see how he cleaned up so nicely. This photograph was taken in the garden of one of his patrons, an eye doctor named Max Linde, who lived in Lübeck. Linde was also a collector of Rodin's work. We see a sculpture in the background, and he became one of Munch's most important patrons, and he tried for many years in vain to make him stop drinking. Here, the operating table. That was one of the reasons he didn't want to have anesthesia. And of course, you see his dramatic sense there. I don't know why he should be naked to have surgery on his hand, but it certainly makes for a much more intriguing painting, and the pools of blood that the nurse is collecting, the three doctors who stand there not paying attention to him, and all the viewers probably looking like they are collected from the street of Karl Johan, sitting looking at it. So he goes on and on, elaborating this incident, this shooting incident. This painting, called The Murderess, was no doubt a result of his work on the Hedda Gabler stage set. And it has a still life, as you can see in the foreground. In connection with that, he wrote a rather amusing note about the still life in the foreground. And he says, "I have made still lifes as good as those of Cézanne's. It is just that I painted the murderess and the victim in the background." So, and another painting plainly called The Murder. And, I mean, these are not joyous paintings, I apologize. Certainly not this either. The double portrait of Munch and Tulla, originally painted as one canvas, but then he cut it in two. And after his death, they were reunited, not exactly the happiest of reunions. Here, a self-portrait with a bottle of wine painted in 1967. Here, he sits slumped over in a similar way as in an Oswald painting. And we also find features, facial features here from the previous painting, double portrait there. These were very turbulent years, and he made two monumental paintings following the work on Hedda Gabler, titled The Death of Marat. Tulla Larsen, naked and grim-looking, has now become Charlotte Corday, who murdered a French revolutionary when he was lying in the bathtub. It is pretty remarkable, the mileage he got out of the shooting episode. In Marat's death, we actually find, though, the beginning to a new form language, a loosening up of the brushstrokes, and paint applied more heavily on the canvas, pointing toward a new direction that he was to explore throughout his later career. Okay, we're coming to the epilogue. This drawing from 1908-99 was made while Munch was recuperating in a private psychiatric clinic in Copenhagen, following a nervous breakdown in the fall of 1908. The writing on top says, Professor Jacobsen electrifies the famous painter Munch and brings positive male and negative female power into his feeble brain. He had experienced frequent blackouts due to his drinking and the voices in his prior to his hospitalization. And the voices in his head grew louder and more insistent. At one point, he rented 2 rooms in a hotel so he could escape from one room to the other. In addition to electrifying Munch's brain, the treatments, as ordered by the well-known Professor Daniel Jacobsen, included the opportunity for Munch to visit the famous Copenhagen Zoo and to use the pretty nurses as models for his paintings. Munch recovered fully, returned to Norway in spring 1999, and was received like a hero. He, like Oswald, now sought the healing powers of the sun. And unlike Oswald, the sun brought Munch life and new strength and vitality to his art. It's outside the focus of this talk to expand on the many accomplishments and triumphs that Munch experienced during the remaining 35 years of his life, including a major mural cycle for the University of Oslo. I shall just briefly mention that during these years, Munch bought several properties alongside the coast of the Oslo fjord, as well as a big rambling house just outside of Oslo, where he lived most of the time. Occasionally visited by friends, but mainly he lived as a hermit, surrounded by his paintings, or his children, as he called them, and who at times were treated sternly if they did not behave. It is known, and there are photographs of him hanging his paintings in the trees, stepping on them, leaving them in rain, snow, bird drippings on them and so on. Again and again he returned to the themes of his past as well as to his favorite literary sources. As I mentioned, Ibsen's Peer Gynt was among his favorite plays, and here we see an amusing later drawing on the top part here, where the aging Peer Gynt with the artist features enjoy a lively encounter with the young, attractive Anitra. Later in life, Munch wrote to Reinhardt, reminiscent about how they had wanted to work on other plays together other than Ghost and Hedda, but that it hadn't worked out because, Munch wrote, he had then been too sick. Okay. But he didn't abandon the drama of the bloody hand. This is a drawing from an album called From the Diary of the Mad Poet. He had started on that diary around the time of the nervous breakdown, but took up again much writing in around 1929. So in connection with this image, I will read a brief excerpt from this diary, not that it necessarily relates to the hand, but it is how he goes back and forth between what he has experienced and what he is remembering and what he is imagining. Many of my notes, he says, accompanied by my drawings, were not intended as notes about my life. Rather, it was important for me to study certain inherited traits that determine man's life and fate. It is a study of the soul. In the resulting work of art, I have exaggerated and altered. Leonardo da Vinci, writes Munch, studied the anatomy of the human body and dissected corpses, just like I am attempting to dissect souls. When I look through my notes, I find some of them naive, and some of them filled with self-pity. Like art, my notes need to undergo revisions to be edited through simplifications and deletions. So, let's quickly then let the cast of characters take a final bow for this evening. Self-portrait with pastel, one of his later works, which emphasizes the hand with a wound from which he never healed completely, though it is the index finger he has here, lacking a joint. Always never afraid of looking himself straight in the face. Always ruthless in the rendering of himself. Here we have the aging Ibsen walking back from the Grand Hotel towards his apartment. And here we have the Tulla and Edward again. And let us again look at this painting from 1898. Munch's Hedda Gabler, if you will. The portrait hung on the wall in the room where Munch always preferred to be, which was also the room in which he died on January 23rd, 1944. Tulla had died the year before, after 2 childless marriages. She continued to be part of the cultural life in Oslo until her later years. Altogether, around 500 of Munch's work are said to have been inspired by Ibsen's plays. All over the world, people wait in long lines to see exhibitions by Munch. Ibsen's plays are the most frequently performed worldwide, second only to Shakespeare's. And Hedda Gabler keeps on visiting again and again. and thank you. I hope you have questions. Or we can just simply take a break and go around and have something to eat and drink. But there are so many unanswered, so much that is unanswered in this little presentation that you must be curious. Yes?
We'll do Strindberg because you put Strindberg in that next line.
Well, I would like to do a talk about Munch and Strindberg anytime, and it is actually the fact that you mentioned Strindberg. It is amazing, this period, how in two small countries could produce these incredible minds, and what went on at that time. You know, there was, and Strindberg will be he's a very important part. He just didn't fit in. Actually, he did not fit in here at all. He had a very tough time during the most dramatic part of his talk. Yes?
Was Ibsen a more stable character? I didn't get much feeling of what he was like.
I think Ibsen, as I said, Ibsen was meticulous. He had a routine. He stuck to his routine, but he also had, of course, his own temper and his own, I mean, for example, his love affair later in his life, when he was 61, he fell in love with an 18-year-old woman, and they had, it was intense, and it had an incredible influence on the writing and on his life in the last 10 years of his life. So, how stable that is, I don't know. Yes?
Yes. Considering Munch died during the occupation, what was his status? Was he just left as a great artist and in his own personal life?
Very good question. He, first of all, about 85 of his paintings that were in Germany were cleaned out, were sold as and looked at as an arte Kunst, were degenerate art, and were taken out of German museums in the late 1930s. Many Norwegians managed to buy these paintings back, but there were also paintings that got lost. During the 5 years of occupation in Norway, Munch didn't want to have anything to do with the Germans. They tried to connect with him because he had made such a name for himself in Germany, despite the fact that they didn't want to have his art in the museums. Indirectly, he died as a result of the war. He lived right on the outskirts of Oslo, with a view down to the Oslo fjord. And in December 19th, 1943, there was an enormous explosion in the harbor of Oslo that blew out windows in houses everywhere, including at his houses. He was at then 80 years old, and frail health, so he contracted pneumonia, and a month later he died. Other questions? Yes?
Is it safe to say that perhaps Ibsen modeled the part of Lutborg on Edvard Munch?
No. No. I would not say that, but there's certainly, I mean, it's like art imitates life, imitates art. It's like Ibsen, like Munch found so many of the characteristics of Ibsen's Oswald in himself. He identified with Oswald, and I think that it's just coincidence, but that the character of Løvborg is very reminiscent of the character of Munch. But I don't think there's anything that was intended from Ibsen's side there.
Did he and Matilda see each other?
No, but here is an interesting... I have wondered about that. There is no indication. First of all, the year after the shooting episode, she married an artist who was 6 years her junior. They went to Paris and they had some wonderful years. They divorced in 1910, whereupon she married a shipping magnate. This man actually, and this is interesting because that shows how little small Oslo was. I have to go back a little bit. The painter Paul Gauguin, his wife was Danish. One of her sisters was married to a second cousin of Munch. Okay? One of Paul Gauguin's sons lived in Norway for many years. And he befriended Munch and he became a very excellent art critic. He was married with the sister of Tulla Larsen's second husband. So there you are. Yes, it's, but there is no indication, but you can't stop wondering, you know. Did they see each other? Munch didn't often set foot outside of Oslo. He had chauffeurs to take him down. He liked to go to the main central railway station, but he had a chauffeur take there, and then he sat in the restaurant in the railway station and read papers from, you know, Berlin, from Paris, from Italy, and in that way he could travel again like he used to do in his youth. But he stayed mainly in his on his property. Yes?
Did the breakdown represent, it seems like it was a real dividing point?
It's true, it was a really dividing point. It was a dividing point in every way. His art changed dramatically. And, you know, he became very much accepted in Norway and got big commissions, stopped drinking, except, it was said, when he went to the dentist, he liked to have a glass of champagne first. But it is amazing when you think about it, somebody with such a fragile health, and most people think that he died young because of the intensity of his early art. He lived to be 80 years old. He was older than Ibsen was when he died. Ibsen was 78.
Thank you, Penda.
Thank you. Oh, my pleasure. We'll get back to Munch and Strindberg another time. Yeah.